The AC doesn't work on this truck. The compressor does not engage. So I'm going to change the air conditioning clutch compressor only, instead of the whole compressor, and save ourselves a lot of money. Welcome to the AutoTechWorld channel. Come with me inside the truck for a second. Right now it is blowing about 98 degrees Fahrenheit, but we want it around here, just over 40, so it is just above freezing, because you don't want your air conditioning to freeze. So instead of doing the complete compressor and having to drain and then add Freon, we will just do the clutch while everything is still installed in the vehicle. Follow me by just popping and then opening the hood, since everything can be done from the top without going underneath the truck. It's actually pretty simple to do the clutch. But General Motors had two different styles of AC compressors. This one has two bolts holding the AC line to the compressor. Some only have one, and that one is a complicated one to change the clutch only. This truck has two though, so let's get started. Remove the air intake duct to get down to the compressor. I'm using a trim tool here to remove the rad hose from the intake, but a flat screwdriver will do just fine. Then loosen the hose clamp that goes to the air filter box. It's just an 8mm head. Also, loosen the hose clamp that goes onto the throttle body or intake. It's easiest if you remove it from the air filter box first. The mass airflow sensor stays with the box. Then you can go ahead and wiggle it off the throttle body and set it aside. With a 10mm socket, remove the upper fan shroud bolt number 1 and bolt number 2. When you look down the sides of the fan shroud, there should be two clips attaching it to the lower shroud. There is the first clip, and the second clip on the passenger side. On the driver's side, the third clip, and the fourth one is actually missing. It's held together by a zip tie. I'll just cut the zip tie with a side cutter. So you can push the rad hose out of your way and just lift the upper fan shroud right out of the engine bay. There's a clip down here to undo the transmission cooler lines. I got this big wrench on the rad fan here, but if I try to spin it off, I'm just going to turn the water pump plus everything that is connected to the belt. So I'm using a hammer to hit against the wrench, and that sudden hit will loosen the cooling fan from the water pump eventually. And once it is loose, most of the time you can just spin it off by turning the fan counterclockwise. Also, when you put it down somewhere, don't lay it flat on the front or the back. Try to keep it upright, because this is a fluid clutch and there might be some oil in there that you don't want to drain out. I'll just lean it against the wall to keep it upright, and then your lower shroud should come out no problem. I actually tried to get it out with the fan still installed, but I couldn't. Maybe you're better than me and can. Let me know in the comments. There's our AC compressor clutch that we have to replace. But before we can do that, this belt has to be removed. You just need a 3/8 ratchet with a little extension, and you can unload the tension to remove the belt or take it off the AC pulley. Let's also unplug the faulty coil by undoing these clips on each side. Once it's unplugged, we also have to remove the connector from the bracket by just bending this tab back, and the connector will slide down and away. There is a 10mm bolt that comes out easily with an impact, otherwise you'll have to hold the clutch while trying to loosen it. Careful not to drop it though. Sometimes the hub will just pull off or easily pry off, but of course, for me it had to be stuck on there so I can show how it's done being very stuck. So you want to install your bolt a couple turns into the compressor shaft so you can install a pulley, and the pulley has something to push against while pulling. I found a bolt in my shop that has the same threads but is a little longer, so I'm going to use that instead. Install my pulley. Tighten the pulley to pull the hub. Alright, it's starting to come now. Once the hub feels pretty loose, you can remove the puller and then take out the bolt. Now the pulley just wiggles off. If you now look inside this hub, the splines are actually pretty rusty. You want to put some safety goggles on for this. There's a snap ring that you need to remove, and it is under tension. If that thing all of a sudden goes flying, you don't want it landing on your eyes. It may take some playing around until you get the snap ring off. A little flat screwdriver might be good help here too. So this is the snap ring. It's a bit bent, but that's okay, since our clutch kit comes with a new snap ring. Now to remove the AC pulley, you'll have to start over again. Install the bolt a couple turns and install your puller to pull off the pulley. Then tighten the puller bolt to pull off the pulley and remove the puller once the pulley is loose. Get it? Pull the pulley with the puller? Anyways, here we have the old pulley with a bearing that can get bad and noisy. There's a new one in the kit as well. So if you have a noisy AC compressor when the AC is turned off, it's probably just that bearing. Like this. If you have a mirror, you could use it to look around the corner to see how that coil comes off that was behind the pulley. It's just a snap ring again. I actually went with feeling for the holes to insert the snap ring plier. Same as before, it takes some playing around until you get that plier right. Especially since the snap ring is in there fairly deep. But eventually, I got the snap ring out, and the coil should just pull off. So here's our coil that sits in the pulley. This hub that is attached to the AC compressor shaft is on top of the pulley. When the coil receives 12 volts, it magnetizes and pulls the hub toward the spinning pulley and makes the AC system work. The coil was the broken part. If I'll ever make a video on how to diagnose an AC clutch, I'll just link it right here and in the description. Here's our new kit with the new snap rings, a new bolt, and some shims to space the hub. So let's unpack this hub. That looks nice. Here's the pulley with a new bearing. And most important, the new coil that I hope will work. You kind of really want to take a look at your instructions as well. Some very important information in there. This is where it tells you the spacing between the hub and the pulley. It should be between 0.018 inch to 0.030 inch, and it should be tested at 3 locations, right where the rivets are. Because you don't want an air gap too big that the coil won't be able to pull the hub close enough to the pulley so it won't grab, but also not too close that it will constantly rub a little bit and make noise. Before you install the coil, make sure you clean the surface where the bearing sits, but also the splines for the hub. Then take your coil, you'll see this pin in the back that will have to line up with the groove on the compressor housing to stop it from spinning. Once the coil is flush on there, take the bigger snap ring, the one that matches up with your old one, and put it on your snap ring plier. Don't actually slide it on all the way though, otherwise you will not get it in the groove. Just put it on the tip of the plier and then slide it in. If the coil cannot be pulled back, that means the snap ring is seated, somewhat for sure anyway. I would look with a mirror or take my phone and make a video around the shaft and look at it to see if the snap ring is fully seated. Here's our new pulley with a new bearing. It should just slide on or simply wiggle on the shaft. If it doesn't, check for the dirt buildup and clean the shaft, but do not use a hammer. Once it's all the way on the shaft, take your snap ring, the new one of course. It looks a bit different, but that's okay. Again, just put the snap ring on the tip of the plier and install it in the groove in front of the pulley. This bolt is also not needed anymore, so we can take that out. Make sure the snap ring is all the way seated before you move on, just like that. Now it's time to install the hub, but remember, we want it at a perfect distance from the pulley. This kit included 3 shims that look like washers. You just add or remove them to set the right gap. Just throw them in there where the splines are and make sure they sit in there flat. I just put them all in to test fit, and then we'll remove them one by one if necessary. Depending how many shims you throw in there, that will decide the gap between your hub and pulley. Carefully slide the hub onto the shaft while making sure you don't lose any shims and they don't go crooked in the hub. Also make sure you're on all the way. To measure the gap, you'll need a feeler gauge. Don't worry, they're not expensive. I'll leave you a link in the description. A feeler gauge has all these little sheets of metal on there at a whole bunch of different thicknesses. So you can push it in gaps and see how thick of a sheet you can push in so you know how big that gap is. The maximum allowed for this gap is 0.030 inch. So we'll see if we can push that in. You should also press down on the center of the hub to get a better reading. But don't push on the outer edges of the hub, because that's like engaging the clutch. Looks like the gap is bigger than the maximum allowed, so I have to remove a shim. When you take the hub out again though, be really careful not to lose any shims. Now I'll only be installing 2 shims. Slide it back on the shaft. If it doesn't go on all the way, don't force it. It might be that one of the shims fell sideways. And yep, so just straighten it and try again. See, now it slides on, no problem. Take the feeler gauge again, and while pressing the center down, try to put it in the gap. The maximum allowed is a bit tight, while the minimum allowed has lots of room, so we are within the spec. With the right amount of shims in there, it's time to install the new bolt. I'm again tightening it with an impact. It has to be torqued to 13 foot-pounds. With everything tightened, the gap could have been changed, so quickly remeasure. The 0.030 inch is too fat, so the gap isn't too big. And the 0.018 inch, which is the minimum gap, slides right in. And if we turn the clutch, it goes in all the way around, so the gap isn't too small. That is perfect. With a 3/8 ratchet and an extension, pull down the tensioner and install the belt. You also want to plug in the new coil, otherwise all this work is kind of unnecessary. And this is what it looks like when the clutch is engaging. A click and the hub collides with the pulley. I'm actually engaging it manually with my scan tool now. I just hit on and off. With the new clutch installed, put the lower fan shroud back in and clip it into the hooks on both sides. Then don't forget to clip in these cooler lines. The fan that has been standing upright till now is next. Just get it started and spin it on by hand. Once you are just spinning the fan, you can change over to the wrench and keep tightening. And once that starts spinning the belt, use your hammer to tighten it just like you loosened it. That sudden hit will tighten the cooling fan nut to the water pump. To help everything from spinning, you can install a ratchet to the alternator pulley and hold the belt like that. Now that the fan is installed and tight, the upper fan shroud can go on. Just move the upper rad hose aside and your upper shroud should almost fall into place. Install the 2 bolts at the top of the shroud and tighten them. Looking down from the top, there's also 2 clips that we removed on each side. So here's one on the driver's side. The other one was missing. It just had a zip tie, so I'll just install a zip tie again and cut off the rest with the side cutter. On the passenger side, we have both, so I'll install the back one and the front one. With the shroud secured, clip in this hose and then the intake pipe can go back on. Slide the intake under this hose, then try to attach it to the throttle body first and then to the intake box where your air filter sits. It may take some wiggling back and forth, but you'll get it to sit eventually. Then tighten the hose clamps to seal it up so all the air comes through the air filter. The last part of this job is to clip in the upper rad hose to the intake pipe, just like that. And that is how you replace only the clutch and save yourself a ton of money. So right there is our new clutch. With everything done, you can close the hood, back the truck outside, and test it out. It's kind of dark outside and the truck is kind of dirty, but what kind of temperature is the truck blowing in the cab? So the AC is off and we are just over 100 Fahrenheit. Let's turn on that AC and get that clutch working. It's starting to go down right away. Awesome. I also turn up the fan to speed things up here. And it goes all the way down to 42 Fahrenheit, just above freezing. That is cold. So we got the AC to blow this cold without draining the gas, disconnecting hoses, and then connecting hose again and adding new gas. And best of all, it's a lot cheaper than replacing the whole unit. If this was helpful to you, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to see more great how-to videos. By the way, you can also follow me on Instagram at AutoTechWorld. Have a nice day.